Hello everyone. This is me making sure that the audio is coming through, which I think it is. So that is good. Alright, looks like everything is going just fine. I'm back. This is, I'm only 2 days into the year and I'm doing a stream, but I've spent a good chunk of the end of 2023 not doing streaming because I've been very busy with stuff, and I'll talk a little bit about some of that over the course of this stream. As you can see, I'm using the like a Google Slides format from last year's Stuff of the Year stream, so that or the Stuff of the Year stream for 2022. The Stuff of the Year stream for 2023 I'm doing at the beginning of 2024 because I was on vacation last week and I was not at home and I was not streaming. I could have maybe streamed, but it would have been streaming from my laptop with very bad audio and very bad video, so I decided to wait. Which means that here I am today. I am going to talk through some categories because it's fun to have wacky awards. As I go through the categories, these will prompt conversations about stuff from last year that I worked on, struggled with, dealt with, things like that. And then I don't know that I necessarily have a then or an after, because some things that I would love to be able to talk about, I cannot talk about just yet because of a few different things. But what that means is that folks should stay tuned for some announcements in the next couple of weeks, probably, question mark. Some of this relies on other people, so I don't have like total control of when stuff is or isn't going to happen. But rest assured that I am doing a bunch of things and I'm excited for stuff this year and am looking forward to being able to talk about it with folks when the time is right. So that's the preamble. I got to go and visit my parents and sister in Indiana last week, which was very nice, and I did almost no work. The extent of work that I did was working on another Google slide deck for a thing that hasn't been announced yet, which all told was not a gigantic amount of work. So there is that. I hope that folks are doing well if you're watching live or you are watching on YouTube or Twitch later on. So if you haven't seen the last year's SOTYs or the Stuff of the Year stream, this is not a serious awards show. I am not a serious awards host. This is me using a bit and creating a framing that lets me talk about things that I enjoyed last year and things that were important to me last year. So there's not like big pomp and circumstance or anything. I'm just going to be having fun here. So all tongues are firmly in cheeks. I will talk about these things because I care about them and like them. I'm not here to shit on anything in terms of like media that I engaged with last year. There are a couple of things where I'll like talk about stuff that wasn't great. But for the most part, this is going to be more of like a celebration and an exploration of what I was up to last year. So, with all that, on to the first category. Up first, we have Best Game to Play with Your Spouse While the World Continues to Be Bad. This category made its debut last year, and the world continues to be bad in new and in some of the same ways as it was last year. So, starting from the bottom, because it's funny and we have a picture of Oreo over here, we're going to see our nominees. What is the dog doing? That being, having a dog is fun, and we play the game of what is the dog doing while we are at home, and it's a good distraction from the world being terrible. Next, Alan Wake 2, a game that came out recently, and Meg and I started playing even more recently. We just actually started playing it in the last, 10 days of the year, so we're not very far in, but it's overflowing with vibes and has been very fun so far. Next, we have Overcooked 2. This is a game that is several years old, and Meg and I played a bunch of years and years ago, like right when Overcooked 2 came out, or maybe not too long after it. We enjoyed it a lot. We reinstalled the game, have started playing it again. It's still very fun. And the last game on this list for best game to play with your spouse while the world continues to be bad is Lies of P. Lies of P is a Souls-like or a Soulsborne. It's mostly riffing off of and drawing influence from Bloodborne by From Software. Lies of P is a like gothic Victoriana action horror game about Pinocchio. You play as Pinocchio. And when this game was first announced, I was like, a Souls-like, but you're Pinocchio. Like a version of Pinocchio that looks very much like Timothée Chalamet. I don't know. Hello, the kids are asleep. Am I very quiet, or is OBS using the correct mic? Interesting. Maybe if I talk more loudly into it, it will work better. How is that? It should be using the right mic. I'm just going to test something real quick. Hello, hello. Oh, you little jerk. One moment. It is the wrong mic, despite the fact that I put the right mic in. Hello. That should be better. Now it's the real actual microphone that sounds good. Okay, well, thank you very much, the kids are asleep, for letting me know, and very good to see you. Happy New Year. So to recap, the first category is best games to play with your spouse while the world continues to be bad. The nominees are Lies of P, Overcooked 2, Alan Wake 2, and a home game with a variety of special rules that you can play at your home with your own dog, but probably not with my dog because my dog is not at your home. What is the dog doing? This includes sub-events like, why is the dog staring at the wall? Why does the dog have his nose pointed at the wrong side of the door when we're about to go out? Does he understand how doors work? I thought he understood how doors work. Why is the dog watching us like a creeper while we're cooking in the kitchen? The answer to that is mostly that he just wants to be included. That's actually the answer to a lot of questions of what is the dog doing. He just wants to be included because he's a love bug. So, with all of that explained, the winner of Best Game to Play with Your Spouse While the World Continues to be Bad is Lies of P by NeoWiz. What is the dog doing? Great game. However, it's not as funny to give an award to that when I could, in fact, heap accurate praise on a video game that has done really well, but I think deserves even a bit more attention. So Lies of P stands out because it's like surprisingly good. The team at NeoWiz really loves Bloodborne, and they spent a lot of time thinking really deeply about what's cool about this game. What's a way we could make our own game that draws on and builds on things that are cool about Bloodborne, like the regain system in combat, where if you take a hit and then you hit the enemy that hit you, you regain some of the health that you lost. It has a very interesting parry system. There's some cool like character customization RPG build stuff that you can do. And probably the best part about like what is specific and distinct to Lies of P as a game that's a Bloodborne-like is that you have this customizable weapon system where there are hilts and then there are blades or like tops of a weapon. And you can pull the weapons apart, disassembling them, and then reassemble them in different combinations. So if you have a great sword, but then you have a billy club, you could pull them both apart and put the great sword blade on the billy club handle, and then that weapon will have the attack animations and patterns of the billy club weapon, but it'll have more of the damage properties of the greatsword. I got a lot of fun out of utilizing this system, and that's really cool. It has a bunch of very good bosses. Thankfully, there is a like NPC summon system where you can get some help with those bosses, because as with many Souls-like games, sometimes the bosses are thoroughly unfair, and I would just quit playing the game if I could not get any help with them, because I would rather not spend, another 10 hours grinding out the extra levels to be able to make that boss fight trivial. So, Lies of P, Meg and I played it together. We both got to the end of the game and beat the game. We had somewhat different builds and approaches. We each got to kind of show secrets and share secrets with one another as we kind of went back and forth and took slightly different paths in our choices. So Meg and I have played various Souls games together probably since, or I guess she started playing Bloodborne in, 2017, 2018, after I was watching it on Waypoint when Natalie Watson was playing with the Big Boy season, in the Big Boy Seasons series that Waypoint did. And then I got Bloodborne for Meg because she's a horror fan. I thought she might enjoy it. She got into Bloodborne and Souls-likes a little bit before I did. Then we both played Jedi Fallen Order, which for me at least helped me get into and enjoy the Souls-like game design style more. And then we went back to the FromSoft games and played Demon Souls and Dark Souls 3, and Meg has played more of Dark Souls 2, and we both played more of Bloodborne since. So, shoutouts to NeoWiz for making a really pretty impressive game, Lies of P. The studio kind of burst onto the scene with this game. It got good placement at one of the awards showcase kinds of things, probably like a Summer Games Fest a couple of years ago, and put out a really strong demo this summer that Meg and I played a bunch of, and that convinced us, yeah, actually this game probably is going to be pretty good. And when the early reviews of the full game were positive, we picked it up. We had a great time, played it throughout a lot of this fall. So that's Lies of P. Next, we have the Turbo Tango Award for Best Roguelike Deck Builder. If you are a longtime follower of this channel, you will know that I really like roguelike deck builders. Those are games where you build a deck and you do something with that deck. And roguelikes, which are games that are kind of like the video game Rogue. I have never played the video game Rogue because it's older, and the types of roguelike games that I enjoy are mostly in the roguelike deck builder space and a little bit less the very original first games that were made inspired by Rogue that then led to the creation of the terminology of roguelike and roguelite. I am including roguelike and roguelite games in one category here. In fact, I would say all of these games I believe are roguelite rather than roguelite. The differentiation, not really important right now. If you want to explore that, you can Google roguelike versus roguelite. That's Lite. And then you can enjoy that conversation, which is not super important to me. So, the nominees for this year's Best Roguelike Deck Builder category for me are Cobalt Core, which is a one-dimensional axis tactical space combat game with pixel art. Wild Frost, which is a more cartoony art style fantasy game where you are trying to go and destroy a crystal that's making the whole world be constantly in snow. The art style on Wild Frost was a big draw. It had some cool customization and progression elements and ways to kind of manipulate your deck in a few different ways. And I played a good amount of that on stream here on this channel earlier in the year. And then the last nominee is something else that I've streamed. I streamed the demo and then the full game a little bit, which is a game called Beneath Oresa, which has more like a comic book, cel-shaded, thick borders, art style, and takes the roguelike deck builder combat and puts it into 3D space where the different actions you do have their own animations and you move between different zones, and had a really strong vibe. So those are the roguelike deck builders I really enjoyed this year. Not as many as in some years. I was actually kind of surprised that I had not played more new roguelike deck builders this year. But like I've said, a notable chunk of this year has been taken up by a thing I can't talk about yet, a new kind of game design work that I'm doing, and other parts of this year have been up and down in different places in a variety of ways. So roguelike deck builders continue to be a thing I return to as a way to kind of like defrag my brain, where it takes just enough mental effort to attend to what's going on that my mind doesn't wander, but otherwise I get to relax. And so I'm very grateful to have a type of game like this that I can kind of zone out to and sometimes be listening to a podcast or something like that, or just as a way to break up my day, or cheer myself up if like the world is being especially terrible. So that's Cobalt Core, Wild Frost, and Beneath Oresa. The winner of the Turbo Tango Award for Best Roguelike Deck Builder is Cobalt Core. This is a game by Rocket Rat Games and published by Brace Yourself Games. I believe it's that way. I went and looked up like publisher and designer studio, but I don't have that in front of me because my overlay is currently up, and if I pulled up Steam, it would probably lead to some amount of me partially doxing myself, and I don't want to do that, so let's not. Here is some cover art for Cobalt Core. We have these kind of anthropomorphic / scaly, furry scaly characters in space. It's very cool. I have completed 10 runs of the game, I think, which has allowed me to unlock a couple of extra ships and some extra characters, and it's been really impressive so far. It is now the game that is what I go to when I need that kind of roguelike deck builder break. So, congratulations and well done to Cobalt Core for being the Turbo Tango Award for Best Roguelike Deck Builder 2023. Good job. Next, the Special Award for Fun Video Game of 2023. This is not my opinion of the best video game of 2023, and it's a different video game category than the last one. Every video game outlet in the world has spent the last 2 to 6 weeks doing their Game of the Year. This is not what I'm doing here. This is some games I especially enjoyed in 2023, and that I'm going to shout out one of them and talk a little bit about why it's getting the shout out here. So we'll see that Lies of P is returning here. Alan Wake is returning here. Marvel's Midnight Suns is a game that came out last year, and I played some then, but then I played again this year. The Legend of Zelda Tears of the Kingdom came out earlier this year. It was the sequel to the almost universally lauded Legend of Zelda blank. The last one, the one that came before. The Switch one. The first Switch one. But Tears of the Kingdom is the one that came out this year. Remnant 2 is the sequel to Remnant from the Ashes, which I played. I played Remnant from the Ashes with The Kids Are Asleep and with The Rising Tides for a Speculate stream earlier this year, kind of leading into the release of Remnant 2. And then I played a little bit of Remnant 2 as a stream game. My computer is a little bit underpowered to be able to run that game well and stream it, so I didn't stream it very much more. And then last but not least, Baldur's Gate 3, a game that if you follow video games at all, you've probably seen a lot of people talk about this year. So I don't need to talk about it more in generalities. But I will talk about it more because... Yep. Why is this not working? Okay, I'm going to talk about it because it's the winner of my special award for Fun Video Game of 2023. 1, I am very grateful for this game because it, I think, is going to bring a lot of people into the world of TTRPGs, because Baldur's Gate is a Dungeons & Dragons licensed game. I think it was a really fun RPG. It was so fun that I have not even gotten to the technical end of Act 1 of this video game, but I played it for 40-something hours across a few different saves, including a co-op game with my friend Lothar. So this is a very fun co-op game. It's a fun solo game. It's fun to see how this company, Larian Studios, has tweaked and adjusted Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition to kind of better fit what they're trying to go for. I think the characters and the companions in this game are really fun. The writing is very cool. And it's really exciting to have something inspired by a hobby that means a lot to me become then very popular in another hobby, right? TTRPGs, and then this thing from TTRPGs came over to video games and is one of the biggest games of the year, right? It won several Game of the Year awards from various outlets. So that's really cool. So congrats to Larian Studios. Larian or Larian, I'm not totally sure. They're European. Good job. Congrats on all the money that you've made. I hope that means that you're in a good position to be able to take care of all of your workers, and that everybody is treated well and gets to work at a good pace on Baldur's Gate DLC or whatever it is that you're going to do next. I will certainly be checking out the next game that you make. I also should go back and play some of the other games that they made before, Pillars of Eternity, which I hear are good, but the third-person tactical RPG is not. I've had a hard time sticking with those games. Like I had a hard time sticking with Baldur's Gate 3. So I may be less inclined to do that, but I do want to check it out sometime when I can. The next category is my favorite science fiction fantasy book that I read this year. Hey, look, here's a familiar name. Fault Tolerance by Valerie Valdez. I'm sorry that I didn't get to this book earlier, Valerie, but I read it this year and I loved it. You did a good job. You should be proud. The Kids Are Asleep is the only one of these authors who is in the room right now, so to speak, virtually. So I will shout out Fault Tolerance first, as I did. The other nominees are Spire Climbers by Rob J. Hayes, Bone Shard Daughter by Andrea Stewart, The Oleander Sword by Tasha Suri, and Bookshops and Bone Dust by Travis Baldree. And I'll go in reverse order to talk about them each a little bit here. Bookshops and Bone Dust is the prequel to Legends and Lattes, which is last year's my favorite science fiction fantasy book that I read this year. Baldree, wrote a prequel. There's a bit in the author's note at the end of Bookshops and Bone Dust that he started and then set aside several books and then started writing Bookshops and Bone Dust, and that one is the one that stuck and worked. Great big sympathy and empathy to Travis, because I have also had a hard time getting going on novels and had to set some novels aside and try to work on other things this year. So good job to Travis for finishing this book, Bookshops and Bone Dust. It's a prequel. Viv, the main character in Legends and Lattes, this kind of tells a story of an earlier part in her life when she gets injured and spends a couple of months in a seaside town kind of recuperating, but also befriending people at a bookstore that's right next to where she's staying, meeting a charming and cool baker who runs a bakery in the town, and kind of like a sort of romance with that baker who's really cool. And we get the introduction of a couple of characters that will show up later in Legends and Lattes. And it's fun where we get Bookshops and Bone Dust is like an early part of Viv's adventuring career. And then the rest of Viv's adventuring career happens. And then Legends and Lattes begins at the very end of Viv's adventuring career and then shows her kind of moving into this other phase of her life. The Oleander Sword by Tasha Suri. This is the second book in a series following from The Jasmine Throne. This is South Asian inspired epic fantasy with kind of a sapphic romantic plot line as like a major through line, because two of the major POV characters have this kind of tempestuous on again, off again relationship that is being pulled in a bunch of different ways by lots of fraught political, magical, supernatural stuff. This book is a pretty hard read in terms of like intensity and nasty stuff happening, but is beautifully written, well plotted. I think it does a good job of managing that like increasing stakes that happens in an epic fantasy and can kind of become a little unwieldy. The third book is probably coming out in another couple of years. I will certainly be anticipating it and grab it when I can. This next one is book one in a series that is actually completed. So I will try to read other books in the series later on. This is tricky because I like to read broadly, but then I read the book one in a series and like, cool, that was really good. Will I ever read books 2 or 3? Maybe not. It takes some extra work for me to read like deeply into a series because I end up reading more broadly rather than deeply. But Bone Shard Daughter is a epic fantasy, mostly informed and inspired by East Asian cultures and civilizations. It takes place in an archipelago with a emperor who has the ability to like do magic with bone shards taken from trepanation, taken from like people's skulls. And then this is all like kind of body horror magic stuff. So like giving a couple moments for people to check out, realizing that, you know, that's a good content note to put out. So there's this magic where you can kind of stitch together bodies and animate them and control them with bone shards. And the bone shards are, the way that you do that magic is it's kind of like programming language. So you write in like if-then statements and things. Very interesting. Cool read, also pretty intense. There's some dark stuff. It does have a cute magic animal companion, which is a big upside. And so yeah, very impressive book. The last one that I haven't talked about is Spire Climbers by Rob J. Hayes. This is a science fantasy progression novel. It's book 2 in the series. The first one was called Titan Hoppers. Spire Climbers came out this year. It is very much a book 2. The power levels increase. There's new elements and new story stuff that is being introduced that complicates the character's understanding of what reality was beforehand. As a disclaimer, I received a arc of Spire Climbers from the author directly because I reached out to be an early reviewer because I'd read Titan Hoppers and really liked it. So I received that in exchange for writing a review, which I did write. The rest of these books I just like bought. And if you are a viewer of this channel, you should already know that Valerie Valdez, aka The Kids Are Asleep, is a friend of mine. I cannot be biased I cannot help but be biased toward liking the things that Valerie does, but also I'm right because they're great. And if you like Annihilation Aria, you should definitely read Fault Tolerance and then the 2 books before it in the Eva Innocente series. The first one is Chilling Effect. So you should start there and then read all 3 of them because they're wonderful. So I'm biased, but I'm right is my new way of giving a disclaimer, but affirming my positive opinion about things that are written by people that I know. So here are all the nominees, and the winner of my favorite science fiction fantasy book that I read this year is me trying to figure out how to consistently move these slides forward. The winner is Bone Shard Daughter by Andrea Stewart. I figured it would probably be, it wouldn't be super couth to give the award to Valerie because Valerie is a good friend. So you should read Valerie's books anyway, but also make sure to check out Bone Shard Daughter. Very impressive book. It has the upside of also being a completed trilogy. So if you like the first one and you're not a weirdo who reads broadly like me rather than reading deeply, and you instead can identify a thing you like and then keep reading that thing that you like, you can read all 3 books in that series. So shoutouts to Andrea, who I think I have met a couple of times at various conventions. Andrea, you did a very good job writing this book. Congratulations and thank you. Also to the other people who wrote those other books, I really like those too. It is funny and strange to be an author and give awards to books, even if they're funny bit awards, because I have to make sure that I'm like really positive and validating because there's enough bullshit in the industry that I don't want to be somebody to like make people's lives more terrible or more difficult if they're like friends and colleagues. I will only shit on things that are terrible made by terrible people. Okay. So my next category is my favorite romance novel that I read this year. I've been reading a lot of romance in the last few years. At this point, it's probably the last 5 or 6 years, more of closer to a decade than to 5 years. So I read romance. Some of it is science fiction fantasy. Some of it is not. Of these books, The Oleander Sword and Fourth Wing are science fiction fantasy. The other ones are not. So Stars Collide by Rachel Lacey. This is a small age gap FF rockstar romance where the 2 leads are pop rock stars who go on tour together and then fall in love And it's very cute and very heartwarming. And I immediately went to look up what other things Rachel Lacey had written. None of them seem like they are quite the same flavor, but Stars Collide was really cool. Role Playing by Kathy Yardley. I have read, I think, 2 or 3 other books by Yardley. This one is a later in life romance between folks that are in their late 40s, early 50s, who meet playing it's basically World of Warcraft. Like, they're in an online raiding guild where there's like voice chat, but they don't know the reality of like who the other people in the guild are, right? Because you can't necessarily tell someone's age just from voice chat and text chat. Surprise, it turns out they're about the same age. And after becoming friends in the guild, wacky circumstances arise, and then they get to fall in love, and that's very fun. The Oleander Sword might not technically, we might not technically call it capital R romance. It's an unfinished series. We don't know if the characters are going to actually end up together in a capital R romance category definitional way, but it was really good. Fourth Wing is like a TikTok phenomenon book that's about like Dragon Rider school in this country that is like constantly being attacked by like evil magic users called Venin, and then the Venin have like wyverns, and the wyverns are different than the dragons, and if you bond with the dragons you get a magic superpower, but then some of the dragons are bonded to each other, and then there's a sexy bad boy who is the son of a guy who led an unsuccessful revolution. And Fourth Wing, super popular book. The second book came out earlier this year. Big TikTok phenomenon thing. Lots of people have already talked about it. I read it because I was seeing so much about it. I wanted to figure out, like, what is this book? Why is it popular? Having read it, I can say I understand why it's popular. It hits a lot of very prominent tropes quite powerfully and does a lot of emotional storytelling. Plus, it has, it's probably like it might be the true breakout book for new adult as a category, where new adult is this in-between category it's not like standard adult fiction, but it's not YA, right? The characters are like 18, 19, 20 or early 20s, not 18 and below. And what this means in Fourth Wing is that you have Magic Dragon School, but it's more like college than high school, and so people are having sex in their dorms all the time. And, it can have a higher spice level because it's technically adult fiction, and it's more immune than to super puritanical people who are trying to get books banned because, oh no, sex exists. So that's Fourth Wing. And then the last book on this romance list is Color Her by Emily Engberts. This is like a femme for femme college romance about a makeup YouTuber / Instagrammer and another college student who's a fan of the YouTuber Instagrammer. And so there's a little bit of like dealing with parasociality and friendship, and like when a parasocial relationship becomes a friendship. So it's like parasocial friendship to lovers. And all the tension and conflict is just interpersonal. Everything works out just fine, and it's a happy time. So it's a good, heartwarming kind of book, much less fraught than something like The Oleander Sword. So those are the romance novels that I wanted to shout out for this year. And the winner of my favorite romance novel that I read this year was Stars Collide by Rachel Lacey. Here is the audiobook cover. I read this book mostly while I was traveling, and it was a great kind of escape and distraction. Travel has become a lot less fun in the era of COVID because when I travel, most people aren't wearing masks, and then I'm in contained areas with hundreds or thousands of people that aren't wearing masks, and that's alarming. But this book was very good and fun, and I enjoyed it a lot. So if you like any of the stuff that I described, I would encourage you to check it out. Next, this is a much more personal category, favorite Speculate session. doing shows with Speculate, I got to play a bunch of different TTRPGs this year, a lot of them with the Kids Are Asleep and other folks in the Strange Friends, and then a few of them with other groups, here, right? Like Slug Blaster and Family of Blades were with the Strange Friends, and then Apocalypse Keys the Pitman sculpture included Yoi from the Strange Friends, and then Court of Blades includes Brandon, and then the Candela Obscura game also included Brandon as well as Greg, and we had various people throughout a bunch of different things. So we played Slug Blaster, which is a very cool, like, interdimensional rebel teens trying to get clout and have fun adventures kind of game that I GM'd for Speculate. That was called The Pizza Party, and that was a really fun time. We played A Family of Blades, which was it's like a leveragey get the band back together, get the crew back together game that Brandon ran, which was called The Fourth Last Job. And that was a really fun game where I feel like everybody hit their character marks really quickly and cleanly, so that we got that team dynamic right away in a one shot, hit some good marks, some ups and downs, good finale. So just a very solid one shot there. Dreams of Old Fair was the Candela Obscura one shot that I ran as part of the Speculate fundraiser. Candela Obscura, of course, the game that I did some consulting on this summer. I'll talk a little bit more about that later. Apocalypse Keys the Pitman sculpture is our mini series that we kind of debuted during the Speculate fundraiser, but then has been releasing weekly in podcast form. You could have already watched the video if you were a patron over at patreon.com/speculate. And now the first video for session 1 is just public on YouTube. So you can go find that at youtube.com/Arvin Elrond and watch that. And then the last 2 nominees are some standout episodes from Valorword, the Court of Blades series that I GM for Speculate. These are session 9, which is when the coterie is on the Sunset Line train and has a run-in with people from Greymist, and then things escalate in very amusing and terrifying ways. And then session 13, which was the tournament finale and the season finale of season 1, where in that episode we had, this was like the 3rd or 4th episode, all about the Hibiscus tournament, where Carevas D'Arencio was representing the house, and there was all sorts of intrigue and magic and skullduggery and wacky stuff going on, and Greg really stepped up his game and then even surprised me with a cool character reveal, which I will kind of remember for a long time as a great example of what happens when you leave more narrative authority on the table for your players to claim and then kind of run away with. Much in the same way that the Kids Are Asleep wowed and shocked us all in a great way at the end of Girl by Moonlight Fractal Spire. So those are some of my favorite Speculate sessions from 2023, and I will give the favorite Speculate session shout-out award to Valorword Session 9, which was on the train. I had a lot of fun with kind of slowly escalating tension, playing a really terrible, terrifying socialite, and then just going ham on the group, revealing a powerful threat. So definitely check out Valorword if you haven't. The whole first season is available in video. There's some extra behind-the-scenes stuff. If you like checking out GM Prep, becoming a patron of Speculate will let you check out a bunch of my GM Prep sessions and world-building things from that. So Valerie is being very humble, but also is accurate that RP is a group effort always. Okay. I've got just a couple categories left, and then I'll kind of shift out of awards show model to talk about just other stuff in the year from me. Favorite new to me TTRPG. These are games that I played for the first time this year, or played in a bigger way for the first time this year. I might have played Apocalypse Keys at the very, very end of 2022 with the one shot that I did because of being a donor to the Big Bad Con fundraiser But anyway, I'm including it here because it was fun. So these are Avatar Legends by Magpie Games. This is the official Avatar, The Last Airbender / Avatar The Legend of Korra TTRPG. It's a Powered by the Apocalypse game. It feels really like an iteration forward from Masks and that version of Powered by the Apocalypse, where you have conditions, and there's a lot of interplay with like representing the emotional states of your character. And all the characters have a principal axis where characters are kind of torn between two principles, and movement along those principles is like a major element of play in and out of combat. I played a probably 12 to 20 session campaign of Avatar Legends online, but not broadcast or recorded, just with like a home group of folks that I play with online, and had a really good time. I feel like we could have done more with and dug in deeper with the principles. I kind of picked my character based on part of the playbook, but then didn't end up utilizing the kind of moving up and down the principles axis as much as I really could have, because it just didn't make as much sense for the character. And if I were going to play again, I would focus on the principles first and then build everything from there, because I think that would be the most like emotionally satisfying. It also has a really fun combat system where if you played Powered by the Apocalypse games, but you want something that's going to be able to give and help you build more intricate and dynamic combats, Avatar Legends is worth checking out. Hello, the Rising Tides. I love that pot friend emote. It's very good. Super Ultra Combo 2023. I don't know that icon. It looks very cool and like a fighting game. Okay, so that was Avatar Legends. Apocalypse Keys, speaking of the Rising Tides, Apocalypse Keys is a kind of high emotion monsters trying to save the world from an apocalypse that they may or may not be fated to cause themselves kind of game. It is the game we played for the Pittman sculpture. We have now completed, we have wrapped recording on the Pittman sculpture. So it's a short mini series. The podcasts of that are going to keep on, coming out over the next couple of months. That is Yoi Gawain Lin as one of the players, along with friends from Queen's Court Games, Aaron Hammonds and Aubrey Knott, who are great. I hadn't gotten to play with either of them before this mini series, but the 4 players with Brandon as the keeper, everybody came together and the characters really gelled very quickly. And I think that's partially down to players, partially down to luck of having some chemistry, partially down to the fact that Yoi, Brandon, and I have all played together, and then Aaron and Aubrey, work together at Queen's Court Games. And so we had some existing player relationships, and then we're able to stitch everything together. And I think that Apocalypse Keys is just a really cool game that is incredibly about the thing that it's trying to do. It wants to go big. It wants big emotions, big drama. It has an interesting kind of improv-driven investigation system that's really loose and flexible, which I think definitely helped us. And I told Brandon this, so this is not a surprise to them. I find that I think Brandon's GMing style is really well served by Powered by the Apocalypse games, and I think the Pittman sculpture was great evidence in support of that theory that I had. So I was right. I think so. The Rising Tide says, it is still very shocking and inspiring how much Apocalypse Keys is very good at constantly doing emotion. Totally true. And definitely check out the Pittman sculpture if you haven't gotten to watch it yet. Next is Slug Blaster. I already talked about it. It was cool. I enjoyed running it. I would like to run it again. I would like to play it. I'm going to do a Family of Blades, and then I'm going to jump back to these other two because they're different. A Family of Blades, again, I talked about it. Brandon ran it for us for Speculate, and a lot of the Forge in the Dark games that I have played have been very like, this is designed for a medium-sized campaign where you're going to play between 15 and 30 sessions, and it's going to escalate in a certain way, and there's going to be a shape to the whole thing. A Family of Blades is like, no, what if we were a one-shot game? And does a good job. So the last two are distinct because these are Darrington Press games. Candela Obscura is the investigative horror game from Darrington Press using the Illuminated World system. I did a video on the quick start guide for Candela Obscura at the last week of May. It was like 1 to 2 days after it came out. It probably was that Friday, or possibly that it was on Thursday. I did my video within like 36 hours when the quick start guide came out, and if you saw that, you know kind of how I do my walkthroughs. But I grabbed the document, we read through the PDF, and I was interested in doing that because I immediately identified that there was what felt like some Forged in the Dark DNA, which then the team kind of, Spencer Stark, who was one of the co-lead designer with Rowan Hall, talked about the influence that they were drawing from Blades in the Dark, and kind of having consulted with John Harper, the designer of Blades in the Dark, and the fact that the Illuminated World system was co-designed with Leila Adelman by Strasha Simovic, who was a consulting designer on Blades in the Dark. So the DNA there was all really clear. So I did this video because I was interested in the game. And then I did another video like a week or so later that was GM tips for GMs coming to games like Candela Obscura or Blades in the Dark from a more like traditional D&D or like pre-Forge or non-Forge traditional TTRPGs. And I did that stream that was kind of talking about GMing tips based on my experience being a mostly Forged in the Dark and Powered by the Apocalypse focused GM. So I did that video, and then Spencer like reached out to me and was like, hey, I like that video that you did. Can we talk about maybe having you do work for us for Candela Obscura? Zip forward from there through like contracts and NDAs and things to I worked on that game. I consulted on like some of the rules and design material as kind of like an extra set of eyes and giving my input on kind of how the game was trying to accomplish its design objectives. And then I wrote the full example of play that you can find in the game. And that was a really fun experience. And because of that experience working on Candela Obscura going well, Darrington asked me to do some more consulting for them, which is what I'm working on right now. And I can't really tell you more about it because I haven't gotten the approval to do that. But what I can tell you about is the fact that I played Daggerheart this year at PAX Unplugged, not in the convention, but during the weekend of that convention. Spencer was at PAX Unplugged doing some media, but also running games of Daggerheart for a few people, myself included, because I'd worked with Darrington and he was already running games that weekend. So he invited me to play in one of those games. And I played with a couple of folks that are kind of in the streaming and actual play space. If you've seen stuff on Twitter, you've already seen folks like KP or Katie Soros talking about their experience there. This was a one-shot of Daggerheart. We went from character creation through kind of one big fight scene, because Daggerheart really spends a lot of time and attention on helping you build your character in such a way that they feel like a whole person that you can role play and create in play really quickly. There are connections questions that establish connections between the characters. There are like really pointed background questions that feel like they are like hard framed GM questions of like, so you failed to protect somebody. Who was it? And, what are you going to do to make sure that you never fail anybody like that again? And that's just like declaration that is pointed at one of the character classes. That's the Guardian, which is the class that I played at PAX Unplugged. So, Daggerheart, they did demos at Gen Con, and then the version I played at PAX Unplugged was, notably different in a few ways. And I'm very excited about it. This year with the OGL crisis debacle, however we want to call it, a lot of people have been investigating games outside of D&D 5e because of any number of reasons. So Pathfinder has had a lot more attention. Kobold Press announced Project Black Flag, which is now known as Tales of the Valiant, and did a crowdfunder for that. MCDM is finishing up a backer kit crowdfunding campaign for their RPG, which is currently just known as the MCDM RPG. And Daggerheart, among those other games, is one of the games that's kind of trying to explore and carve out their own space in the broader world of fantasy adventure games, right? D&D is the fantasy adventure game that people know, but no game can be all things to all people. And I don't think it's good to try to make one game all things to all people. I think that D&D is better at some of the things that people use D&D to play than it is on some of these other things that people use D&D to play. And I'm hoping that in the next couple of years, as these new games like Tales of the Valiant and MCDM's game and Daggerheart and kind of the new material from Pathfinder, though it already existed, that this will help give people choices so that when they're playing a fantasy adventure game, they can play a game that is going to most effectively support them having the kind of fun that they want to have with that genre. Because that way people aren't trying to plug square pegs into round holes. They go, cool, here's a square hole over here. I'm going to have a lot of fun. And the round peg goes in the round hole. And we don't have the experience that's like that TikTok video of the user interface designer like face palming. So those are some favorite new to me TTRPGs from this year. And the winner is Apocalypse Keys. I discounted the Darrington Press games because of a conflict of interest. But also Apocalypse Keys was really amazing, and I had a great experience with it just in the one shot that I played with Ray Najati, who's the lead designer and creator. Speaking of GMs that are like wildly inventive and great at doing high emotion, Brandon, I feel like we need to get you and Ray into a conversation about GMing, because I feel like some of your GMing styles and preferences overlap in really productive and interesting ways. And plus it'd just be fun to get to hear the two of you talk about game design. So I'm just going to file that away and see if that's a thing I can help make happen, if that's something that you would like to do. I imagine that Ray stays very busy, but maybe we can get them to do something at some point. This is not an obligation. I'm not creating an obligation for anybody, so don't worry about it. It's just a thing that I think would be cool. So you should check out Apocalypse Keys. Especially if you like Hellboy or you like Control or SCP stuff, any of that like investigative group trying to figure out what's going on with like supernatural phenomenon in modern day the world. So that is that. The next category is a special award. The special award for TV show that's secretly a Genrenaut story. Last year, this award went to the Apple movie Spirited, which is like a Christmas Carol sequel reboot. This year, I started watching the new Quantum Leap series, which started last year. This Quantum Leap is, in fact, a sequel series to the original Quantum Leap, as well as being a reboot because there's a whole new team. Quantum Leap is a big kind of prehistory influence on Genrenauts because I watched a lot of Quantum Leap growing up as a kid. And so it's very fun to have a new Quantum Leap show where they're doing stuff that is then inspirational to me for Genrenauts and is in line with things that I was already doing with Genrenauts. Plus, as I'm trying to sell the Genrenauts RPG, I can say, oh, well, have you watched the new Quantum Leap? And using that as a touchstone. So good job to the team making the 2022 Quantum Leap. I enjoy it. I look forward to watching more of it. Next, we have this does include talking about some more negative stuff, so heads up. This is the special award for hardest professional shit to get through this year. Oh, hello, Actual Factual. Thank you for the follow. And that brings us to the follower goal of 125 followers that I had set. So good job, everybody. I'm not streaming a lot actively anymore, but I would love to figure out how to work that back into my schedule because I enjoy this type of streaming. I've especially enjoyed the kind of like game design oriented streams, but those take more work than just hopping on and playing a video game. So it's something I'm working on. I'll try to figure out how I can. We talked about square pegs and round holes, but now the thing that has come to mind is how do we square that circle? I don't know what the relationship between those idioms is. I don't know that there is one. But anyway, that's very cool. Thank you. Special award for hardest professional shit to get through this year. This is also somewhat related to the not getting to stream as much thing. At the beginning of the year, we had the OGL crisis. That occupied a bunch of attention and caused a bunch of headaches to many, many people, myself included. I was not as directly impacted as a lot of people because I was not actively working in the like third-party 5e ecosystem in the way that a lot of people that I know and a lot of other people that I follow have been. But that was really rough. It was more rough for other people, but it was also still rough for me because I saw a potential future where the industry was going to be really constrained in a way that was bad for people that wanted to be able to play anything other than D&D. And there are lots of people that mostly want to play D&D, and that's fine. But I want a tabletop industry where more than one game can be popular. I think that the way that things ended up was kind of surprisingly positive after having been really negative. And I think it happened because of public pressure and because of reporting by people like Linda Codega, who broke the story and was kind of doing for me, the most important reporting on the OGL crisis. Other people were doing reporting, some of it better than others. I'll leave that there. Other BS that I'm not going to talk extensively about is machine learning bullshit, like stuff that gets called AI, AI art, AI fiction. That's ChatGPT, Novel AI, Midjourney, DALL-E, whatever, diffusion, that kind of stuff. Thank you very much for the sub, The Rising Tides. Thank you very much. I appreciate it. But yeah, like the hello, Actual Factual. Welcome. Good to see you. So yeah, like machine learning, large language models stuff has been a bummer because I've seen a lot of people, even after they've learned the degree to which those programs are just rampantly plagiarizing a bunch of stuff, including the fiction side for ChatGPT plagiarizing no fewer than 5 of my books, because those books have been revealed to be in one of the data sets that that system was trained on. I was not asked. I did not give permission. I have not been paid for any of that. So I hate it a bunch. Triffity Mats notes quite rightly in the chat that Linda is not working at IO9 anymore because somebody in charge of IO9 said, let's look at our staff here. Linda Codega, the most prominent reporter in the world of TTRPGs who broke the biggest story in TTRPGs in most of a decade. Yeah, let's fire them. That's bullshit. Linda, you rock. I look forward to seeing more of your work wherever and however it is that you do it. It was great getting to chat with you some at PAX Unplugged. So good note from Triffity Mats. Yeah, that's that. Another rough thing was going to PAX Unplugged when PAX Unplugged did not have a mask or vaccine requirement. In 2022, they had both a mask and a vaccine requirement, which made sense. I went, I had a good time, I did not get sick. This year, just as big, probably bigger, but then no masks were required, vaccines were not required. A fair number of people were still masked, but nowhere near a majority. And so I went, I was masking all the time, and then I was also using like a nasal spray thing that I had heard about from I think it was on Instagram or TikTok, reposted by like an RPG friend of mine that was reposting, I think, something shared by Margaret Killjoy, the science fiction fantasy writer. So thank you to my extended communities for looking out for me, because I went to PAX Unplugged this year and also didn't get sick, despite being around a whole lot of people a lot of time. PAX Unplugged, overall, very positive experience, but it was definitely stressful to be in that crowded of a place for that much of a whole long weekend. But I used a lot of different forms of protection because I'd also gotten the updated vaccine. And so I had the vaccine, masking, and that kind of nasal spray thing. So, was it the Swiss cheese method, layering method of protection? It worked, for me at least. So I'm grateful for that. I'm going to save starting and stopping 2 novels for last. So I'm going to jump down to keeping my mouth shut about working on Candela Obscura. Understandably, sometimes when you work on projects, they say, we are not going to let you talk about this until X time. And I was very excited to work on Candela Obscura, and I had a good experience doing that. And then I had to wait until the Darrington Press people were like, okay, here is when you can talk about being involved, and here is where you can talk about the things that you did. I totally understand, but it was hard to keep my mouth shut. And I'm glad that I can talk about it. And on like the scale of how hard this was to deal with, this is not actually that hard, right? Worrying about COVID was a bigger thing. Getting stressed about large language models and like pseudo AI shit, much more stressful. And then the novels thing was really more the first half to 2/3 of the year. But, writing, author, novels, this is a thing that's very important to me. It is where I put the most of my attention and effort as a writer over the course of this year. And so I worked on kind of a science fantasy mech novel, and I got 25-ish thousand words in, and I think there's a lot of cool stuff there. And then I hit a big speed bump of like, what am I doing? Have I gone off track? I lost momentum and had a really hard time getting it back. So instead, I said, okay, I'm going to follow my interest and my excitement to this other thing that I'm now going to work on. I'm going to see if that'll work better. So I started writing a romance novel that's like a near future. What if politics in the USA got notably better in a few ways? How could that create then interesting situations for people to kind of develop relationships, and then speculate on what are the other tensions that could arise from certain things getting better for people, and then the relationships that flow from them. And then I got about 25,000 something words into that one and hit a roadblock on that one as well. And that roadblock of about 25,000 words in, or about a third of the way in, that's something that I've dealt with a number of times on previous projects. It's not new to like 2020 and beyond, but what is new is just not being able to get through it for whatever reason. And it was a big bummer and the source of a lot of frustration over this year. And getting to do this other work that I've been doing has been a good break from that, because I haven't been dwelling on the fact that I'm bummed about kind of losing momentum and losing the plot on those novels and not being able to like find my way back in and keep them moving forward. I am hoping and planning to go back to the mecha novel, figure out where I am, probably re-outline, maybe do a little bit of revision, kind of build myself as much of like a booster rocket as I can to like launch myself back into the work and carry forward, and see if I can then get to the end of a draft on that. Because if I can get to the end of a draft, then it becomes a question of revision, which is a whole different can of worms. Revision, often very hard for me, but it is impossible to revise a draft that doesn't exist. So I have to complete a draft, and then it can be revised, and revision can do a lot. Also, the way that I write, I do a lot of world building improvisationally as I go. And so a lot of the first draft is me telling myself the story, getting to know the characters, figuring out what I want to do with the story, and then I have to revise to actually get there. So it puts a lot of extra work onto the rough draft, but I don't really know how to write novels other than that. It's just how my brain works. So the hardest professional shit to deal with this year is starting and stopping 2 novels, that being Stolen Futures, which is the mech novel, and Save versus Romance. These are both working titles. I have no idea if these titles will stick. They're just how they are labeled in my brain and the files. So that is the end of all of the awards category stuff. So I'm going to jump back to this, and then I'm going to talk in some, I guess, slightly more vague terms, because again, there's stuff that I can't announce. When I'm able to announce them, I'll be able to kind of give more of a sense of like what I'm going to be up to this year. But what I can say is that I'm still kind of working on this games consulting thing that I'm doing for Darrington Press. I'm going to be doing my best to get back into Stolen Futures and work on that. I am trying to figure out which conventions I can go to this year, both book conventions to kind of get my author novel career moving in a positive direction, as well as going to game conventions because I want to continue to build on the connections that I've been making as I get into game design. Doing The Only Logical Solution is Hijinks, and then starting to work on the Genrenauts RPG and getting the chance to work on Candela Obscura and kind of other stuff that is flowing out. I now say on my Twitter handle, right? It's like Mike Underwood Game Design Era, because people have, XYZ era. And it's a little bit of like a positive affirmation to myself that I have this thing that I'm working on, this kind of new career that is emerging that has been really validating and fulfilling, because I've been getting positive feedback on the work that I'm doing and I'm being well compensated. And it is a way to flex my writing skills that is different enough that I seem to have so far, knock on wood, avoided a lot of the pitfalls that have been really hard and have been stymieing my author career. So I want to keep moving forward with that as much as I can, because it's been really fruitful and fun and cool, but I don't want to entirely leave the writing behind. So I've got several things that I'm trying to juggle. Also, I've got kind of new actual play projects that I want to work on, kind of informed by lots of interesting conversations with people at the New Jersey Web Fest, and then at PAX Unplugged and Big Bad Con, and things kind of in between and here and there. So that is all of that. Like I said, I want to figure out where streaming can fit in with this. It might be making YouTube videos rather than streaming. It might be just streaming to Patreon subscribers with like unlisted YouTube streams. I haven't totally figured everything out, right? It's early enough in the year, and my attention has been on part of the equation, and I haven't gotten to figure everything out just yet. So I'm going to keep on working and figuring out how to try to do all the different things that I want to do, understanding that I am human. I only have so much time and energy, and that certain things are going to get prioritized because other people are relying on me, or because they're the things that are going to bring money in that will help my household be financially solvent, and things like that. But all of those things are in one way or another informed and supported by folks like you all who are watching, whether that is watching live on Twitch or watching the VOD on Twitch later or on YouTube. So I want to say a special thank you to everybody who watches here or has been watching my other videos. It's been really fun to do this and to be able to make it a conversation to a certain extent, and like talk back and forth with people, and to get to share my thoughts and hopes about game design and observations on video games and things like that. So thank you to The Kids Are Asleep, to Triffity Mats, to The Rising Tides, to Actual Factual, to other folks who have followed and subscribed, folks like, Arudnell, who's been like a frequent viewer and chatter, hanging out with me in video games and other things like that. I want to say thank you to again to the Rising Tides and to Greg Wilson, aka Brandon and Greg, who I make Speculate with. We did a lot of great work in 2023, and I think I've said this before, but we should really feel proud of all that stuff that we did. Thank you also to all my strange friends who were in a lot of that Speculate stuff that we made. Thank you to all of the folks that I got to meet and chat with at various conventions over the year, and help me kind of sort out my thoughts about and develop new ideas for things like actual play. And thank you to Spencer Stark and to the folks at Darrington Press for giving me a shot at getting into game design in a bigger way, which has been a great, very cool thing for me. And I'm really glad that the folks at Darrington watched that video I made, and I'm really glad that I made that video because that has it opened a really big door for me, and that's been cool. And I'm trying to kind of continue to internalize and be grateful for that, because it's definitely a big, like, several things all aligning and having then a big impact on my life. So that's really cool, and I'm grateful for that, and hoping to be able to help other people pursue the things that they're excited about, and to make opportunities for folks in the future to kind of pay it forward, send the elevator back down, all of those good metaphors about expanding the field and making it more diverse and more awesome. Whatever field that might be, actual play, TTRPGs, prose, publishing, anything that I am involved with and have any ability to help other people with. That's pretty much that. So for other updates and things like that, you'll want to check out patreon.com/Michael R. Underwood, or look at socials. I am still on the Hell site at Mike R. Underwood. I'm also at Mike R. Underwood on Blue Sky and Instagram, and I'm on TikTok, but don't really produce a lot on TikTok. I'm also on Threads. It's the same name as on Instagram, because that's how they've been setting things up. But probably the best place to find stuff that I'm doing is over on Patreon, especially if you don't want to be on the Hell site. Which, understandable. There's a lot of terrible things happening there, and I'm really only there still because people that I follow are there, and there are a lot of people that follow me there that I haven't been able to connect with elsewhere. And such is life in the era of the Twitter succession wars. Fingers crossed that Elon Musk is forced to sell Twitter to somebody else who can then do a good job and kick all the Nazis off. Fingers crossed. I want this for us in 2024, and all other forms of kicking Nazi ass, so that they don't bother anybody and cease to exist. So that's that. Thank you, Triffity Mats. Happy New Year to everyone. Let us bring the energy of fuck Nazis, make them go away, into the year 2024, and do our very best to make a world that is more worth living in and more humane. Whether that is through games, fiction, or just by telling people off when they're being assholes. Things like that. You know, some positivity, some righteous anger, mix it all together, do that kind of thing. Okay, now I'm rambling, so I'm going to stop. Thank you all very much. This has been a fun time. Great to see you, and I will chat with you some other time. Hopefully I'll get to stream soon, but thanks for being here. Here's where the thing goes to ending. It's been a little while. So here we go.